Badlands, what are the Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Okay. My computer crashed right as soon as that intro was ending. That was weird.
Weird.
Yeah. It's still kind of crashed. Like it's strange. I only see a small window with you and me, and I see nothing else. It's just floating there, and I have no control over anything. It's very strange.
Huh.
But you can hear me, right?
Oh, yeah. You're coming through. I mean, if you want.
Weird. It's okay. I can make this work.
If you can make it work, I think everyone in the chat, let us know if you can't see us, but otherwise we'll just power through.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. So I think, overall, how you doing, Gordon?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Good to see you. Welcome to Breaking History.
Welcome to Breaking History, everyone. So yeah, there's a lot we're going to go through. I think we have maybe an hour, a little over an hour. But there's a few things I prepared, and I know a few things you've been thinking about. So we're gonna see how we could just like tie a variety of seemingly different topics under one singular theme. I'm sure it always tends to happen naturally when we lean into it. And we're gonna touch on some of the elements. I've presented a few marks, or I'm gonna be presenting a few remarks on the historical dynamics shaping the crises that are being blamed for purely natural disasters, man-made climate change, whether in Europe or now what we're seeing in California with very devastating fires. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, how this should never have been an issue in the first place, and how hopefully certain concepts that John F. Kennedy was fighting for continental management of water systems might be revived with Trump 2.0 here coming in. But before any of that, let's listen to a word from today's first sponsor, Goldco. Uh-oh. Can I see it? Yes, I can see it. Okay, here we go. All right, the last 4 years have put so much stress on American family finances. Help end the stress now with President-elect Donald Trump by investing in gold and silver. Join the thousands of hardworking Americans taking proactive steps to help protect and safeguard their savings with our partners at Goldco. Goldco has been established as a top-rated precious metals company and a leader in the gold industry, providing white glove treatment for over 10 years. Their buyback guarantee assures that if your situation changes, they will repurchase your metals at the best price, providing you with that peace of mind. You'll have the peace of mind that comes from knowing that your hard-earned assets are securely diversified. Find out the relationship between gold, silver, Trump, and you with the free report focused on Trump and your financial future. You may even qualify for up to 10% back in bonus silver. Visit badlandsgold.com to claim your free information and instantsilver.com/badlands to see how much free silver you can get. That's badlandsgold.com and instantsilver.com/badlands to take control of your financial destiny. I can never quite end the narration right when the video ends. I've got to get better at that. But, all right. So, did you want me to tackle the first element first, or of the North American Water and Power Lines, or did you want to go through some topics that you've been thinking about?
Well, I mean, I think what makes the most sense is let's kind of lay out what we're thinking. Seems like the California fire story is pretty big, and certainly seems intentional to a certain extent, and the debate can be held as to what extent. I think the normie level, Fox News level, is that it was mismanagement by the government and maybe a little bit of like nefarious, malicious response activity, depriving water, like that kind of thing. But I think you and I probably recognize that it goes deeper than that, and it was probably more coordinated than that, yes, and even more intentional than just pure mismanagement. The timing of it certainly can't be ignored, like a week or week and a half before Trump enters office. Yeah. So I think it makes sense to kind of focus on that for the most part, because you and I have been talking offline about the climate change agenda, just and the green efficient, the green energy, like all that nonsense, and how the root of it we discussed in the past live on the show that it goes back to these like Malthusian cults. Thomas Malthus being the guy who came up with the idea that the population growth can't keep up with food production, and therefore there's this scarcity that exists that's going to limit humanity. And if we basically don't cull humanity by limiting our industrialization and limiting progress, we're going to starve ourselves to death. And so that kind of spawned the idea of artificial scarcity, and how the powers that be get control of natural resources, control them, limit their release, limit the information getting out about them, and ultimately use it to drive wars and drive conflict. Because for a long time, for generations, people have always thought that we were reliant on the Middle East, for example, for oil. A lot of people thought that's why we went into the Middle East, was for oil. And that was certainly a factor, but it wasn't for us to secure the oil, because we secured the oil. The British secured the oil after World War I. We've talked about that, about how all the oil in the Middle East was secured after World War I. So we didn't go in there to get the oil. We went in there for other reasons that were related to oil and related to pipelines and related to opium production in Afghanistan and overthrowing governments on behalf of Benjamin Netanyahu and his oligarchy. But yeah, with all that said, let me toss it to you to kind of focus on the green climate change agenda stuff. And why don't you elucidate and enlighten us a little bit on what that's all about?
I loved your setup, and yeah, no, I think when you look at a lot of people, they don't put enough weight on Thomas Malthus as a high priest that invoked a new age of scarcity and scientific management in our current age, and so many of the problems that we've faced, from like the ideology of what was brought to the surface with the Trilateral Commission, with the Bilderberger Group earlier under Prince Bernhard, the creation of the entire like modern conservation eco movements of the 60s, that Prince Bernhard also helped co-create with Prince Philip Mountbatten and Julian Huxley, who founded the World Wildlife Fund for Nature back in 1961, specifically to counteract the type of scientific and technological optimism that was baked into the American psyche. Like that was historically the dominant tradition of the United States, was a general cultural faith in the goodness of human beings made in the image of God, and the practical expression of that fact in the form of our ability to always leap outside of the limits to growth by making new discoveries and coming up with new inventions that liberated us from the previous shackles that the ignorance to said discoveries was causing. And so that ability to translate new discoveries into new technologies, to apply that to the productive process, to upgrade the education system, was like a very elastic, creative dynamic, right? Very reciprocal as far as like a dialogue between individual human beings, the species, and the universe as a whole. That shows, I think, something about natural law and the mandate to always progress, to create new abundance, instead of adapting to scarcity and adapting to limits. So as far as like the California fires are concerned, yeah, I think most people watching this lean towards the fact that these were not, anthropogenic climate change, like the angry gods punishing us for our polluting industrial transgressions, as has become the green gospel of the Green New Deal. It's not that. There's cases of, I would say, like several layers of human agency behind it. I know that there has been certain culprits apprehended who were actually caught lighting fires in California. I know that there were some videotapes that were released of what these individuals were a part of. I don't know. I know that you also have things like the Quebec fires from just 8-9 months ago, where New York, New Jersey, it was like red. The air was red because of the dust, the fires from Quebec primarily moving down as far as the smoke was concerned.
I remember that.
Yep, that wasn't that long ago, and I'd seen enough evidence that persuaded me that that was also human agency, arsonists that coordinatedly, because you could see the satellite images where in a coordinated fashion within an hour, like 50 major fires all cropped up, totally disconnected from each other, implying that there was some form of top-down coordination. And I know that you have eco-terrorist anarchist groups that have been groomed by radical eco-Marxist professors at various universities that have built up cells that get training in various conservation parks. And just, you know, it's part of a thing. You've got like this weird anarcho-gladio, eco, tear-down civilization movement that takes the form of things like the Deep Green Resistance. That's an actual name for a California-based agency. You've got the Extinction Rebellion as the UK sort of mother hand of a lot of these subgroups that's been around for some time. You know, they interface with above grounders and below grounders. The above grounders are people like Mark Carney, who have infiltrated things more on the official public faith. You know, they have they operate through the corridors of practical public power, but they interface and facilitate the growth of the undergrounders, who are going to be the useful idiots deployed to go and blow up a pipeline. As the movie, there's a Hollywood movie, right? Just like a year ago called How to Blow Up a Pipeline.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It's like
Oh
a
my
romantic
gosh.
story of these 5 kids from different walks of life who all got radicalized to save nature and declare war on these pipelines in Texas. And it's their story of how they evaded capture by the authorities, and they're heroes. They're actually heroes. It's a recruitment tool and a Hollywood movie. So people can Google How to Blow Up a Pipeline Hollywood movie and go and watch the trailer and shake
I
your
was a
head.
little nervous typing it in at first because I was like, I better make sure I put in Hollywood movie because otherwise it's like you're typing in how to blow up a pipeline. But yeah, they're gonna use this against me. Yeah, no, I'm looking at the Wikipedia. This is wow. A work of nonfiction. Yeah, and this, I mean, to your point, when I was a kid, I mean, I was probably, I guess maybe I was in high school. No, I was in middle school. I was definitely in middle school because a guy in my grade in middle school, his older brother, who was several years older than us, he was like 5 or 6 years older than us. So it's not like we were in the same generation, so to speak. As far as like that age, at that age, you don't consider someone 6 years older than you to be your age. But he got caught up in something like that, like a environmental liberation group, and basically got somehow coerced or somehow tricked into psyoped into like going to they're building like a big mall, and they went out there and like put fuses in the construction equipment, and they went around to all the neighborhoods like around and with hammers and like smashed up all the SUVs. And so that, yeah, like the FBI got involved, I remember, and like they all got arrested, and he went to prison because I'm pretty sure he was 17, maybe, because I remember by the time he ended up getting prosecuted, he was definitely 18 by the time he ended up like in court, and he got treated as an adult, and they sent him he went to prison for a long time, like 5 years at least, probably longer. Yeah, man, it was a total situation of like useful idiot. Like these kids just got swept up in this. Now looking back, I'd be interested to know more about like the recruitment process and how they actually got psyop into this. But it was through, because my friends and I obviously all went on like the internet to look up what it was. I mean, we were old enough to figure out how to do that. And we did find like websites and stuff that were dedicated to this group that he got psyoped into joining. And it was, it was a big story around here because he was just like a normal kid, and he got swept up into this stuff, and along with others, and ruined his life, destroyed his life, and like you said, useful idiot.
Yeah, and it's like, if you really think that human beings are the worst, are directly the cause of everything bad that's destroying nature, and that nature without humans is the cause of everything good. If you have that hyper simplistic formula that presumes human beings are not a part of nature, but we're something like anti-nature, and every time we do anything to make life better for ourselves,
we're a disease.
Yeah, we're a disease. If you really believe that, then you will. If you take, I mean, that's the sad thing, right? Is that they capitalize on something, they pervert something that is fundamentally a natural good thing of empathy, right? Trying to be an authentic person, trying to do good. Like they take these natural human sentiments and then they redirect it with a self-hating sort of identity. And I remember working in a university and you had like traumatized students and there were bulletin boards with like, you know, messaging every day to the students at this university for if you need climate psychotherapy, if you're feeling climate depression, there are these guidance counselors that are specifically trained only for young people who are going through climate depression because you're a virus, you're part of the, you know, the cancer. So of course you're going to have issues and you might want to resolve those things by solving the problem, cutting the cancer out, you know, which might involve some people dying who are trying to, like, let's say, cut down a tree and you've sabotaged the tree by packing in a ton of nails into the tree, which has killed actual people working in lumber, have been killed by these types of traps, you know. So it's a serious thing. And even the Canadian environmental minister today, this guy Stéphane Guilbeault, he was one of these eco-anarchists who's gotten arrested so many times for sabotaging infrastructure over the years. I remember him when I was younger in school. He was kind of like this eco-celebrity because he was always getting arrested. He was like helping to destroy, you know, all sorts of things that were tied to electrical grids. And then now, as soon as Justin Trudeau came in, he was made the energy minister of Canada, you know? So as far as what are these above grounders, what do they look like? Well, that's it, right? It's so all that to say, we have different levels of human agency behind the current thing, from arson to, I would say, even just downright neglect of doing the things we were doing in the 50s and the 60s that we stopped in the 70s, that it was our responsibility to continue. And so I'll show about 15 or so slides just to quickly get some of that across with a look towards, again, solutions. So I put this together this morning based on an article that I published on Badlands back in December, called, well, I called it here Top-Down Solutions for Continental Water Management, the case for NAWAPA. The NAWAPA, it's an acronym for the North American Water and Power Alliance. That was a concept of the late 1950s that actually began in certain ways under Kennedy's administration, and specifically Frank Moss, a senator, was the major champion of this, starting from 1961, for a concrete top-down continental program for future water crises, but also for hydroelectric power, increasing food production. And Bobby Kennedy in 1967 began working with Frank Moss and began advocating this thing openly. So this earned a lot of enemies with some of the Malthusians that were taking control then of the Canadian government and increasingly preparing themselves to take control of the US government under the Trilateral Commission, the Malthusians that were revived with Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew and David Rockefeller and company, who were really just taking a more, you know, pseudo-scientific language to rehabilitate Malthus, who fell out of favor since Malthus died in the early 19th century. People began to realize that his forecast that the world could never have more than 1 billion people was wrong. Malthus was wrong about all of his forecasts because he didn't acknowledge the fact of human creative thought. He just pretended it didn't exist. And all of these guys do, because they're not creative and they're projecting their own limits onto everything else. So this idea is something that I only learned about, the North American Water and Power Alliance, because for about a decade I was an activist with the Lyndon LaRouche organization, which I did from 2006 to 2017. And during that time, there was a campaign that we were a part of to lobby Congress, the Senate, the House of Representatives, members of the Canadian Parliament. We had a lot of meetings to try to get across NAWAPA from 2011, 12. And I hosted seminars on this, workshops on this. So it became something I became more and more familiar with and began to really love the more I looked into it. So that's why it's like something in my mind when I look at crises like this today. So let's just get on it. First up, too, it's not just America, right? Like, it could be fires, it could be floods, as we've seen in Valencia. On the bottom right is a picture of just the 2024 flooding in October that killed over 200 people in Spain. We were told it was climate change. It wasn't. It was the fact. I mean, Spain had taken down. That's just one report celebrating the amount of European dams, hydroelectric dams, that had been demolished to restore the natural ecosystems to their rightful place. But the lack of flood controls also went with the shutting down, the destruction of these dams. And in Spain, that's the most, as you see in the dark blue, that was 2021. It only increased geometrically. So they shut down 239 dams across Europe. Spain had 256 dams shut down between 2021 and 2022, an additional 133 shut down in 2023, and I think something like 160 shut down in 2024, like all demolished. Cost a lot of money to demolish these things, and that resulted in just, again, total destruction as soon as you had a slightly more than usual rainy season. And the King of Spain and others are big eco fanatics trying to promote the idea that this is just a lesson why we need to shut down even more dams in the fight against climate change. So absurd.
Yeah, yeah. What's interesting is that there's really only 2 mountain ranges in Europe. I mean, if you cut Europe off basically where Poland is, and kind of like discount the Balkans and Ukraine and all that, like kind of leave out Eastern Europe, which is actually mostly flat anyway. The 2 mountain ranges, one of them is the Alps, which is basically where Switzerland is, like North Italy. Runs from eastern France across to Austria. And then the other mountain range, of course, is in northern Spain, and separates Spain from France. So those are basically the only 2 mountain ranges. The rest of Europe is effectively flat. I mean, you have rolling hills in certain places, like throughout Italy. But yeah, that's just interesting. I was thinking about that as you're showing this chart, because obviously the mountain ranges are going to the topography would dictate where a lot of these hydroelectric dams would be located, because of where water is going to flow and how rivers are going to flow.
Yeah.
And when you have rivers on more flat land, like you do throughout most of Europe, the water pressure isn't going to be as strong enough necessarily to have a huge hydroelectric dam. Although I guess you probably could engineer it. You probably could engineer one. So,
yeah.
But that just makes me think that that's one of the reasons that Spain was targeted so heavily, because they probably have a lot of dams there, I would imagine.
Absolutely. No, very good point. Very good point. So yeah, that was the Spanish case, as far as, like, you could have too much or too little water, right? That's the too much water causes destruction. But in both cases, you can mitigate them through human invention and foresight, thinking ahead. We can, solve both of those extremes that nature periodically throws at life on Earth that results in death. Humans, unlike other animals, can specifically mitigate that, again, through discoveries and the wise application of said discoveries. So here's another aspect of why the current fires in California should not have ever even have been such an issue. One other element was the criminal negligence of one of the biggest reservoirs. This is the, I forgot the name, it's got a funny name, the Yanez Reservoir, the Santa Yanez Reservoir. That was, for whatever, I haven't found the correct reason yet, but I think it's this green eco ideology. But back in 2009, it was emptied for repairs, and never refilled it. It's supposed to hold 117 million gallons of water. It has been consciously kept empty, which, had this been full, this would have been directly instrumental in making sure that the fire hydrants did not run dry. They would not have run dry, as we saw with all of these images of firemen running around from like sinks with little buckets, or like putting water in their hats and throwing water in these raging fires. It's absurd. That shouldn't have happened. So again, another point of evidence for at the very least, criminal negligence.
Yep.
Though we do think that it's probably something more vicious than that. Another thing too is just this ideology, just like in Europe, how they're taking down all these dams. Gavin Newsom put, I think, $500 million into destroying 4 of the biggest dam, or the 4 very large important dams in California were demolished. This one just being celebrated in September of 2024 when it was completed, and this river was made liberated. The desert adjacent areas were restored to their natural desert habitat. There's been 52 desert hydroelectric dams in California alone sanctioned for demolishment between 2021 and 2025 by Biden. That's that was done. So, but California has been a prime target. California stats, just a few things to keep in mind as far as like thinking about the implications or the war on California. They've got like over 40 million people, more than Canada as a whole. So a lot of people. It's been mostly, from much of history, California was mostly desert. But due to things that were done, especially under the New Deal, the transformation of a big chunk of the desert into the Imperial Valley, which became one of the top food growing regions of the world. It was, again, hydroelectric dams, other things, water diversion projects, transformed California into an abundance, a hub, where there's now 21% of the water use in the USA is California. 67% of California's water comes from groundwater basins. So like aquifers and basins underground is where most of that water comes from. Because there isn't that much precipitation overall. A lot of it comes down from the water runoff from the north, from the Columbia River. The Central Valley of California is 25% of the nation's agriculture, but it's only 1% of the surface area. San Joaquin Valley, which has also suffered a lot under fires, it represents half of California's agriculture. And I would say one thing very important is that we are running out. There's a crisis of aquifers. The groundwater, it has depleted and continues to deplete in many of the strategic areas that grow a lot of the food for North America at a very fast rate. And just like, 5 of some of the biggest ones include the Cuyama Valley, the White Wolf Basin, the San Pasqual Valley, Chowchilla Basin, and the Northern Kern Basin, which are dropping upwards of more than a meter per year. That's a lot. And that's not really replenishing. That's just dropping as far as the underground water. It takes a long time for that to replenish. Texas also, there's something like 82% of the various basins in Texas that are depleted at a faster rate than they're being replenished by seasonal like rainflow, floods, or snow melts, things like that. So it's an issue. There's only so much you can get from these underground aquifers and basins. So that's another thing. How do you get that water back? It's possible, but people have to think much more intelligently. Lake Powell, Lake Mead, you got these very strategic natural reservoirs that are going dead pool. Dead pool just meaning that they normally provide water for residential and agricultural use. They're running down heavy. That's just a couple of recent pictures of both lakes in 2023. One of them has naturally 27 million acre feet. That's Lake Mead. The other one, 25 million acre feet, Lake Powell. But that was 20 years ago. Today, drying out. So that's another thing. And then you got general incompetence, criminal incompetence by our neglect to maintain the already existing infrastructure. And the American Society of Civil Engineers produced a report a few years ago going through how at least $5 trillion needs to be found in order to simply bring America's vital structural infrastructure up to relative safety standards. That's a huge number. It's a big number. And that's just one dam in 2017 in California that failed, resulted in a lot of property damage and other things. But a lot of these things should have been maintained and repaired and replaced, which were not, especially due to the fact that we embraced this consumer society, post-industrial idiocy in the early 70s. And we just stopped you could literally look at all of the annual investments we were putting in as a percentage of GDP in the 1950s and 60s into road maintenance, rail, hydroelectric dam building, nuclear power investment, and just see it all dry up from 1971 onward. It literally disappears, and we flatline. So things just are permitted to atrophy and decay, which now we're feeling the effects of it as things actually start breaking down. Now, the solutions were always based on, as far as people like JFK, who was thinking continentally, and there's been a number of these great thinkers. The vast majority of the water runoff in the continent is in the north, in Alaska, Yukon, northern British Columbia. So something like 276 million acre feet per year are drain out. Sorry, hold on. No, it's 276 acre feet per kilometer squared per year drain. Anyway, 3 times more, let's just say it this way, 3 times more water runs off into the oceans in the Northwest Basin than anywhere else in the continent as an average. So that's where the vast majority of wasted water goes. And it's not being used by living processes. It just precipitates, goes into glaciers, melts, runs back out into the oceans, gets hit by sunlight, becomes precipitate, rains back down, and has this cycle in the Arctic and doesn't participate in the economy, in nature in any way. So part of this idea that was put forth with is another just view of the various water, the river systems of North America and how to sort of think about them in a more holistic way. JFK and was already overseeing dozens and dozens of new dam builds while under his short presidency. And he made a point, I think this quote just gets across his philosophy nicely, where he's talking about in 1962 a dedication to an underground tunnel system for water diversion. And he says that this is an investment in the future of this country, an investment that will repay large dividends. It is an investment in the growth of the West, in the new cities and industries which this project helps make possible. And I hope that in the 1960s, we will commit ourselves to the same kind of mutual effort and not regard those projects which aid our cities as inimical to Colorado, or those projects which help our farmers as taking it away from our cities. Because that concept of the moving ahead of a great country on a great errand is what I think can give this country its leadership in the future as it has in the past. So again, he's speaking to the scarcity ideology, right? Where people have been induced to have the idea of, okay, urban industry has to fight for water from farmers that want to use their water, right? And vice versa. And there's only so much to go around. But he was thinking about how to use creativity to create abundance. At the time, what was circulating in Washington was a Parsons Company design that is featured there. It's a LaRouche Pack design for acquiring like 10% of the water runoff in the Arctic in Alaska and Yukon, putting it into reservoirs, pumping it up into the Rocky Mountain Trench. And it sounds really big, but it's totally doable. The engineering feasibility studies were largely done, and it's just using natural gravitational flow. And then something like, how many? It's something like 76 lifts, or no, 90 lifts, pumps. You create something like 80 gigawatts of electricity just by virtue of moving the water down through the Rocky Mountain Trench. And it would just go all the way down into California, Texas, North Mexico. And those are just some of the big projects, like the lifts and the reservoirs that would be built up along the way that would replenish the aquifers. So that's all there. This is like an extension of it. If you apply nuclear
keep talking. I'm going to plug my computer and just keep talking. I'm listening.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So, well, Gordon plugs in the computer. I'll just keep on rambling through this thing. And yeah, the idea would be to also replenish the Great Lakes. So a lot of Canadians who don't like this idea, because we've been brainwashed to think Americans only want to steal our water, which is absurd because we've already agreed to selling our water to Nestle, which gets, for pennies on the gallon, water from Canada that's sold all over North American supermarkets. So we've already done that, but we've been brainwashed to think that any type of large scale project is just big bad Americans wanting to steal our water. So people get almost religiously anxiety ridden about these types of ideas. But I'm just saying here, in my investigations, we've been brainwashed. This would totally benefit Canadians. Part of this involves a transit line of water that would be flowing down to clean out the Great Lakes, which are very polluted. So replenish, clean out the Great Lakes. It would create a barge line as well. It would also increase food production in the prairies by a factor of 20%. It would, like I said, replenish the aquifers that have been drawn down all across the groundwater from Oregon down to California and Texas and Idaho and everywhere else in between. It would double American food production, according to the last estimates that I'd read about. A couple of other graphs from the NAWAPA. That's from a 1960s, I think 65 promotional video or 64 promotional video that people can watch on YouTube. It's 15 minutes long. That just features the Parsons Company going through in a 1960s animation, which is pretty well done, how this would look as far as, again, just building up the water in a 650 million cubic meter reservoir in the Rocky Mountain Trench, of which 100 million cubic meters could be released every single year down south. It would take maybe 6 or 7 years to just build that up. Huge engineering challenges, but totally doable. A lot of it would involve tunneling, big tunneling as well, because when you have water moving on the surface area, that's more opportunities for evaporation. So you want to get rid of that. So tunneling would be useful. You'd be greening the deserts, totally restoring natural, like the types of green ecosystems that we had like 1,000 years ago or longer would be restored in the context of doing this. It's another image of it. And it was already begun. Like, so in Canada's case, we already started this back in 1960, in the early 60s, when the premier of British Columbia, this guy, W.A.C. Bennett, who's activating one of these dams on the Peace River, was working with John F. Kennedy. He was being blocked by these Malthusians like Andrew McNaughton and what's his name? Major Louis Mortimer Bloomfield, who was also part of the program that killed John F. Kennedy, was that same Mortimer Bloomfield who worked with Prince Bernhard and Prince Philip as vice president of the World Wildlife Fund for Nature. That Mortimer Bloomfield, who ran Permindex, that oversaw as an assassination bureau the attempted assassinations of Charles de Gaulle and John F. Kennedy, that same guy made a name for himself also as a leading Zionist, championing the militarization buildup of Israel in the 50s. And he was a water diversion lawyer who worked with Andrew McNaughton, the head of the Canadian military in World War II. Together, those two guys fought Senator Moss, fought JFK and Bennett to try to keep Canadian water in Canada and not share it with the Americans through these types of projects. And this is the Columbia River Treaty, where there was a lot of buildup of dams, first begun by Franklin Roosevelt and then really continued by John F. Kennedy. Bennett, like I said, worked with Kennedy, gave his support to Bennett to build the northern, what are called the Bennett River Dam and the Peace River development, these big reservoirs, the Williston Reservoir, that were all part of the broader NAWAPA design for continental water management. Unfortunately, just like Governor Brown's son, who was brainwashed by Esalen and these anarchist ideologies who took over from the first Governor Brown in California, so too Bennett, his son, Bill Bennett Jr., also was brainwashed at Esalen and turned into an eco-warrior fanatic who fought to undo all of his father's successes. So both Brown and Bennett's kids became heads of California and BC after their fathers, who were real nation builders, were ousted and undid their father's work. And the other thing here, just to keep in mind, is that this is also totally natural. Like, China and India have represented the biggest greening projects in the world, and NASA demonstrated that over, I think it's like 10%. There's 10% more green, like more photosynthesis happening on the Earth's surface, and 70% of that increase that was not even supposed to be there, because it was always assumed that every time human beings do economic activity, we destroy nature. Mm-hmm. But 70% of that was actually driven by China and India, because China and India have actually said no to the Malthusian program and have carried out like some of these big water projects. The $66 billion water diversion project that's even bigger than NAWAPA has been begun by China to move water from the south, where there's an abundance, a lot of flooding, and move that excess water north, far north, into Beijing, into Tianjin, and into the west, even as far as like Xinjiang, which is going to be completed by 2050. And that's created something like 160 gigawatts of electricity, flood controls, massive increase of food production, like you name it. And yeah, like they've had to move some villages along the way, and they paid villagers to like move and have like brand new modern houses built for them. But and people can scream and shout about how bad that is, but at the end of the day, like the whole nation's abundance and power has increased, and the Gobi Desert has begun to green, as NASA proved. India's done something similar. USA, just to like show the comparison, we went from 26 1,000 terawatt hours of productive electricity in 2000 to 25,800 in 2021. China went from 12,000 terawatt hours in 2000 to 43,000 production in 2021. So massive increase. There, 4 of the 10 biggest dams in the world have been built by China in the last 15 years. The nuclear power that China's building, they're building all of it, right now as we speak. And it's not like they're just trying to keep it for themselves. It's just like, this is a country that doesn't want to die, and they're just showing the rest of the world what a country that doesn't want to die can do, which ironically, when we look at what JFK was doing and the paradigm that built up, the abundance that we've been sort of sucking on for the past 50, 60 years, that's how we used to think. So we can get that back, but it requires just doing a lot of soul searching and realizing how this artificial scarcity is being sort of pushed onto us. So that was my little mini exposition from my essay published on Badlands that I wanted to share, knowing that Trump is coming in, and I'm hoping that this kind of conversation is going to be brought to the table as far as the policy making circles are concerned to start thinking about NAWAPA and NAWAPA-like projects.
For sure. And I mean, and just take a quick minute to acknowledge that yes, arsonists were probably involved in these fires. Could also be people talk about the direct energy weapon stuff. That seems very feasible. That's a different discussion, so we're not going to get into those conversations here. But I think that the point just being is that these Malthusians will use whatever instruments they have at their disposal, whether it's a book of matches or a direct energy weapon, to cause fires, cause destruction, and then blame it on climate change and blame it on that stuff. When really it's a combination of bad management, because they're not cutting away the underbrush, which I know a lot about because I have friends who own acreage in Virginia, and they spend all their time doing that, is clearing their land, right? I mean, you have to do good land management. That combined with the arson, combined with the nefarious malicious stuff, I want to tie it into the news cycle and kind of bring it to kind of a place where I think people will understand it. Let me share my screen. Mm-hmm. So I have so this is to that point you just talked about the Gobi Desert turning green. This is similar news has been coming out of Saudi Arabia over the past year. This is a story from April 2024. And it says that Saudi Arabia, deserts around Mecca and Medina are turning green due to heavy rainfall. And there's pictures showing how the Arabian desert is actually growing grass now. There's even stories there were stories coming out all year about this was prophesized in the Quran as the end, the sign of the end of times. And, of course, you're always going to have people pushing that kind of stuff. But really, it has to do with their water management. And basically what they're trying to do in Saudi Arabia is they're trying to build new cities in places that were previously completely uninhabitable. They've been uninhabitable for hundreds of years. The big difference between Arabia and Europe is that real estate in Europe was all kind of viewed from a agricultural standpoint. That was the value of land. So value from a real estate standpoint, from a control standpoint, going back thousands of years, was all about how much land did you control, which equates to how much food do you control, which equates to how many men can you summon to your army, at the drop of a hat, when you call the banners, so to speak, right? Arabia is different because it's not the land there has been mostly useless. I mean, there obviously is agriculture there to some extent, but most of it is all about control of the water, not control of the land. So the places where power would be drawn to would be oasis. So it's who controls the oasis, because in order to cross the desert, you have to know exactly where the oasis is. Otherwise, you're gonna die of thirst. And one of the grave sins in the desert is to drink out of another man's well without his permission. That's punishable by death. So it's all about control of the water versus control of the real estate, control of the land. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to dig these vast canal systems to bring water into regions of the desert where they didn't have it before, which then could lead to, being able to build cities and utilize land that's otherwise completely useless. And not only useless, but you talk about the sifting sands of the desert, because there's no undergrowth, there's no root system to hold the land together, so it just turns into sand and blows away in the wind. So you actually take land that is dry and arid and then start to make it green, like you're seeing in these pictures. Talking about, and so here's another story from June of 2024 of this year. Desert City will turn green in $23 billion project. Here's Saudi Arabia looking to turn a desert oasis, turning an arid capital into a desert oasis. Talking about Riyadh. So they want to make like a section of Riyadh highly forested and make it like basically build like a forest in the middle of the desert. And remember, Riyadh is in the dead center of Saudi Arabia. So like it doesn't have a river that runs through it. There's no lake. There's nothing like that. It's just literally a city in the middle of the desert. And so to build a forest there is pretty aggressive.
Do they have like underground aquifers or anything that they're drawing from, or is it just
that's
like piping of water?
Yeah, so that's what they're trying to pipe water from both coasts inland, and then basically build like a vast network of canals to create value in this land that you could then develop into inhabitable land and make it more manageable and at the very least make it green so you could grow trees and foliage, which obviously is going to benefit the earth, right?
And I guess they have a lot of they're doing desalination. Like, is it?
Yes. So Saudi Arabia actually, on average, the average person in Saudi Arabia consumes twice as much water as the average person on Earth because of their climate. They so they actually have they spend the most money of any country in the world on desalination. They have vast desalination programs. I'll get to an article in a minute that shows all the money that they've invested in desalination. But before I get there, I also want to point out we're not going to go into this either, but these people, Stuart and Linda Resnick, these are like the wealthiest farmers in America. They purportedly control 60% of the water in California. They're like pistachio magnates, like pistachio farmers. They also own like Fiji Water. Like here are all the companies they own: Fiji Water, Palm Wonderful, Wonderful Pistachios, Wonderful Almonds. And so they're being blamed for a lot of this like water mismanagement and the reason that this fire happened. They also were blamed for fires that happened back in like 2014, 2015. So this is like a water management situation, and they are responsible for this allegedly. I just wanted to point that out. But real quick, I'll hit these headlines. April 2023, Saudi Arabia financing a $240 million dam in Pakistan. So this is the Momad hydropower dam project on the Swat River. You then have this one from April 2024. So this is a year later. This is, again, Pakistan, a $1.2 billion dam, and the Diamer Basha Dam. So this is a different river, different dam project, but still in Pakistan. And this is like an investment opportunity for them. So Saudi Arabia sees it as an opportunity to help Pakistan, but they're going to make money doing it because they're going to benefit from having, from controlling the infrastructure, and it's a mutually beneficial situation, right? Just like China's been doing with their Belt and Road Initiative. Mm-hmm. Here is Saudi fund for $100 million development for the Rogan hydropower dam. This is in Tajikistan, which is Central Asia. So they're investing in these dams all over the place, places that are water scarce. Here's three. They're going to build 3 dams in that NEOM project, that like line project. Now, there's a lot of consternation over that. People are getting upset that this is like the smart city thing. It's important to understand where this NEOM project, this is like that line city, is being built. It's being built in this region of Saudi Arabia. Here's the Red Sea. Here's the Sinai Peninsula. Here's Israel. It's where Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt all meet in a city called Aqaba. And so it's important to know that humans have traversed this land for 200,000 years and have never inhabited. Like there's a city in Aqaba, that's where like the water from the Red Sea terminates, right? So there's a city there, but everything over here in the east in Saudi Arabia, this is for those who've seen the 1962 film Lawrence of Arabia, the part of the movie where they have to, like, the 50 men have to cross the desert, and they're like, this part of the desert is like cannot be traversed. You will die if you do it, and they almost do die. That's this part of the desert. They call it I think in the movie they call it the Devil's Iron, because it's basically just flat sand with no foliage, and the sun beats it down, and it gets like 120 degrees during the day. You can't even travel during the day. You have to travel at night. So this is the part that they're cultivating, and they're building the Line City. And the idea is they're going to connect these coastal cities, these coastal settlements, to cities inland, by building a city that is like, you're not forced to live there. That would be the smart city dystopian model. You can leave whenever you want. I mean, and if you can leave whenever you want, it's not a dystopian prison camp.
Yeah.
And then here's some pictures of these dams they're going to build. So they're going to bring water to places that historically have never had water, and therefore you not only couldn't inhabit it, but it's dangerous to even try to cross certain parts of these of deserts. Now, getting away from the dams for a minute, like, let's talk about some of the other systems that Saudi Arabia has developed, and this is actually pretty exciting. I wrote about this article a few weeks ago. This is December 20th. Saudi Arabia discovers lithium reserves in oil fields. And the short, quick, too long didn't read explanation here is that back in 2021, Saudi Arabia announced, let's see if I have that. Do I have that one handy? Right here. Scientists developed cheap and easy methods. This is June 2021. Scientists developed cheap and easy method to extract lithium from seawater. So at the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Riyadh, Aramco and Ma'adin is the Saudi national mining company, and Aramco is the Saudi national oil company. Aramco is the most valuable company in the world. It's the company that makes the oil for OPEC. They both invested in this program to try to figure out, can we extract lithium from the seawater that we're using, the salt water that we're using in mining? Because in mining, they'll blast water into the ground in order to get that's what fracking is you blast salt water into the ground in order to try to get the oil to squeeze out of the rock. And then you pump it all out, and then you separate the salt water from the oil. And so they're like, we have all this like extra salt water. I wonder if there's a way if we can get lithium out of it. Now, initially they found that only 0.2 parts per million lithium is in the salt water. So while they figured out how to do it, it wasn't a very good yield, and it became a little too costly to try to look into it. So what Aramco did is they said, hey, we have these 2 oil fields that we're fracking right now. Why don't you come set up a pilot program? And we think that maybe there's going to be a higher yield of lithium in these oil fields. And so fast forward to now, 3 years later, and yes, they have found the pilot program is a success. They were able to extract lithium from the salt water, and now as a result, you have ExxonMobil, you have all the other oil companies are now looking to launch their own pilot program, because oil runoff, which is the salt water that is the byproduct of this fracking process, that's the number one like byproduct of oil, like oil production, like oil extraction, is you have all this salt water that is like nasty, and they're like, what do you do with it? And so now they're going to run it through these machines. They're going to pull lithium out of it. It's absolutely a success. And as a result, you now have other oil companies now looking to do that, to join them. And think about that. If you stop and you think about the way lithium is mined traditionally, it's very, very invasive on the environment. It's very like you have to build these massive mines. A lot of times these mines are being done in like third world countries. There's human trafficking involved. There's child slavery involved. People have criticized Elon Musk for the lithium mines where he gets his lithium from in Africa. They use child slaves. So that's absolutely been a knock on the lithium mining process. This would subvert all of that. And basically you would just be mining lithium, extracting it from seawater. Concurrently with that, I mentioned before how you have like here's the white paper that they published back in 2021, and this was, by the way, you'll notice some Chinese names here. Chinese researchers were working at the the university with the Saudi researchers to develop this machine. And so here is 2016, Saudi aims to double desalination energy efficiency, $80 billion investment. Their goal was by 2025, we're now in 2025, to cut the cost of desalination in half. And so that was basically a 9 or 10 year pledge. And then you have all these stories of MBS over the past few years. Here's April 2023, Saudi Arabia investing heavily in desalination. They're pumping another $40 billion in desalination plants. And there's a number of articles I could run through where there are billions and billions of dollars of floating barges that pull seawater like onto the boat and then separate the seawater, like desalinate the water. You have plants all over Saudi Arabia where they're building these canals, and so the seawater comes inland and then it goes to the desalination plant, and the desalination plant desalinates it. That's how you are able to potentially build cities in the middle of the desert and like build a forest in the middle of Riyadh.
Wow.
And then so yesterday, like 2 nights ago, I wrote an article for The Brief. This is like serendipity, where Ash, who's been the editor for The Brief lately, because Burning Bright his wife just had a baby, so he's been out for a few weeks. She sent me this article and was like, "Hey, can you do a take on this? This is interesting." And it's the Crown Prince and De Silva met the president of Brazil. They met, and it just talks about kind of the boilerplate press release of like talking about economic opportunities and how are we going to bilateral agreements and how are we going to get along. I looked into it. Brazil is number 9 in the world for oil production, so they actually have a pretty large oil industry in Brazil. And I found this Saudi mining company. So Ma'adin is the company that I said they're the ones who are investing heavily in this lithium project, because they're the ones who would have the infrastructure and the logistics to do something with the lithium they're pulling out of the seawater. It said this is from January 14th. So this is from yesterday. According to Brazil's Mines and Energy Minister, Alexander Silveira, mining company Ma'adin plans an estimated $1.3 billion investment in Brazil. President Lula invites the Saudi prince to visit the country. So in a separate press release, separate from, Saudi Arabia is coming to meet Brazil, this was released. So in my take in the news brief today, I wrote about how I speculated that maybe this is related to the lithium thing. Well, lo and behold, like as we were going live, I just found this, but it says this was posted just a few hours ago. Saudi Arabia to scale up lithium expansion as it diversifies from oil. And so now this is apparently Aramco made an announcement this morning with Ma'adin, where they're going to invest billions of dollars now in a new partnership to extract lithium from water all over the world. So they're going to be looking to do this at oil fields everywhere. And it's not just lithium. They're now also looking to do phosphate, copper, gold, bauxite, all of those minerals that are listed right there. Those are all the mines that they have in Africa where child slaves are being used, human trafficking becomes an issue, all that stuff. So they're now looking to see how can we extract that from water as opposed to having to dig down in the earth to get it. This is the future.
Amazing, man. That is the future. That is the future. That is a new paradigm in mining, and it's really glorious. I'd love to know, I'm going to look more into this, like the actual science behind how the different membranes are selected in the process in more detail of how they extract. Because, I mean, every molecule has its own particular signatures, electromagnetics, size-wise, what it reacts to. So I'd love to know what kind of techniques they're using for each one of these, phosphate and gold and lithium especially. But yeah, that is really a new way of thinking, right? As far as comparing it to the historically primitive thing we're accustomed to when we think of mining. You're just going in there with brute force, something to physically dig into the ground, pull up what you need, right? And this is just another level of cognitive power and understanding that's applied in thinking about the whole thing of like how, because it's true, like every single square foot of or cubic foot of soil or even ocean water has, I remember reading this some years back, every single element of the periodic table and nearly every single isotope. There's like 2,000 isotopes. You know, some elements have more, some less. Of every single element that exists can be found, but it's so diffused that it's we don't know how to use it in a way which is economically expedient. But you're actually saying that we're there. Like Saudi Arabia and their friends are actually they're there. They're actually now making this economically viable, which is going to render irrelevant and obsolete the older way of just digging into the soil. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and just to round it out and finish it up here, in a separate announcement yesterday, the UAE announced that they are building a giant solar farm. Their state-owned renewable energy company, Masdar, because they also have a ton of, like state money because of their oil industry. They're building this massive like solar farm with like a massive like battery city basically. And it's going to be the largest battery like storage facility in the world. And the idea is that they're trying to advance the battery technology. And I talked about this, I speculated on this before, that the best environment, like the best region to develop solar, because the big issue with solar has potential. Trump has said that solar has lots of potential. The problem is that right now the battery technology just isn't there yet. Like you can't store the solar cells need to be advanced further, but really more importantly, the battery technology to capture the energy the solar panel produces and then use it later. That's what really needs to come a long way. And Elon Musk has said the same thing. And I've always said that the Arabian desert is probably the best environment to cultivate that, because there's lots and lots of money there looking for investment, and they have nothing but sunshine, right? I mean, they don't get a lot of rain there. So you have sun shining like all the time. That'd be a great and they have lots of unused land for reasons that I already explained earlier. That's a great place to build out solar farms, and for them to then take that technology, develop it, get it to a certain point where it becomes economically viable, to then introduce it organically into the economy, as opposed to mandating it and then you destroy the economy because nobody can transition to it fast enough, because it's not viable for regular folks to utilize the technology. Only oligarchs can use it, and that's where you get the artificial scarcity. And remember, for those who who have forgotten, back in December of 2022, December 2020, this would have been 2 Decembers ago. So December 2023, the UAE hosted the COP26, which is like the climate change summit. And there were like this woman there, I forgot who it was, but she tried to attack the UAE like energy czar, like energy minister, about like oil. And his response was perfect. He was basically like, look, until you can present us with a viable economic solution for using these alternative energy things, like methods, we will continue to extract oil from the ground, because that is what the world needs in order to maintain a productive, industrialized economy. You want to take us back to the Stone Age and put us back in caves with this ridiculous like fantasy that you have about us just using electric energy like tomorrow. Like we're just not there yet. So they're being very pragmatic, and like the way that they're viewing it, like they're not putting the cart before the horse. They're telling you, you're insane if you think we're going to start using this stuff tomorrow. But at the same time, they're investing billions of dollars in developing the technology. So eventually one day we will get there. And why not let them do that? Let them develop the technology, as opposed to mandating it from like taxpayers in the United States and Europe. Let them develop it using their oil money, and then they can share the technology with us, and we can, like the rising tides lifts all ships, like that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I think that's the part of the thing too, right? Like I've noticed that a lot of people, they tend to take an extreme view when it comes to solar panels. Like either you think that they're the best thing since sliced bread and the replacement for all of our energy needs forever, or you hate them and you realize and you think that they're just a demonic force of depopulation. And I think that like the truth is sort of like in between, in a sense, because if you're using them in a wise way, they can supply your energy needs for residential uses, where, you know, like if you have a town of people living in a town using, like, you know, with modern living standards, air conditioning, all of the stuff we enjoy, especially in the desert, you need a lot of air conditioning. Solar panels can do the job pretty well. It's just that when people start thinking that they can replace heavy industry, like all of the energy that's used for heavy industry, that's where people get stupid on this. Yeah, and they're only looking at the mathematical sort of like wattage or gigawatts, and they don't realize that doesn't tell you about the quality. That's a quantitative scalar. And if you're going to melt industrial steel and produce like industrial level concrete and the types of heat and power intensities needed to do that stuff, no, windmills, solar panels are not going to ever cut it, because just the throughput of electrons that can possibly move when you have photons from the sun hitting the what do you call it, the plates, the actual
solar panels, like
the solar panels themselves, the solar cells, yeah. There's only like an upper limit that you can get as far as electrons being put into motion that could be applied to do human work. That you can't sustain industrial civilization. You can't power high-speed railways with that quality of energy organization. So if you're using it as a part of a broader energy basket, it's perfectly good. Yeah. And the fact that Saudi Arabia, the UAE, like you're not going to get anywhere in the world where there's more sun than in these areas, which simply requires that they be cleaned periodically with squeegees, because there's a lot of sandstorms. But otherwise, it's great. I mean, the fact that they're doing that. But again, for me, like, I'm just so locked into the revolution in mining that you were getting at. I didn't know about that, how practical it was. And because I mean, I love this science, and I was enthralled by certain propositions that back in the 60s, you actually had a program from the U.S. Department of Energy for developing prototypes for a fusion torch, which would have, I mean, they do fusion torches in certain forms of industry even now. Like you're using plasma. They're plasma torches, but it's a fusion-driven plasma torch, which would, if you actually can tap into commercially practicable fusion, then you can essentially, with these designs that I was looking at from the Department of Energy, and some of them were taken up in the 70s, but then all of this was all slashed by the Malthusians, so it sort of went nowhere. And I know the Chinese are looking at this. They're the only country that I know of, at least, maybe Saudi Arabia is, which looks at how do you break down any soil or garbage, like anything in the material solid state can be broken down into a plasma. So plasma is like the fourth state of matter, right? Mm-hmm. So everything is liquid, solid, gas, or plasma. And plasma is like, you know, when things get so hot that, you know, you have electrons being stripped away from the nuclei, which has, you know, neutrons and protons, positive charged, you know, material inside of the nucleus of every atom that makes up the entire periodic table of elements. So when you start losing electrons, you start getting a positive charge, and that usually, like the ionosphere of the Earth, is a positively charged plasma. Most of the universe is plasma. And all matter can be broken down utilizing the technology of a fusion torch into a plasma state, at which point the technology, what was so cool about this for mining was that you could find the electron or the electron spin, the individual signature of whether it's silicon or gold or whatever element you want to mine. You could just take garbage like landfills, right? Garbage, mm-hmm. dirty diapers and stuff that we're just throwing into Africa. And you could like literally take that, make it a plasma, pull out whatever pure, uncontaminated elements that you want, then utilizing the signature of each through, I guess it would be more of an EM signature filtration process. It wouldn't be so much membranes, I guess. And then all of a sudden you got material that you would never find in a more pure state, but you would never find this in nature. And, you know, it would apply to mining asteroids, mining the lunar regolith, which obviously, like, that's what Russia and China are looking at. They got plans by 2030. They just ratified their treaty for a lunar colony, a lunar scientific base, by 2030. They just ratified it in Moscow. And I think it was August of last year. So they're going ahead. Donald Trump also, we know that he fought really hard to re-empower NASA to take back its original mission to go into deep space exploration, which would also be economically incentivized through a mining orientation, because you do have to have that as well, driving the considerations like how are you going to get investors, what type of payback are you going to get.
It has to be economically viable. Otherwise, otherwise you're basically mandating it, and you're putting the cart before the horse. And that's the process. It's like, how do we get there without destroying a civilization, gutting an economy, wiping out an entire socioeconomic class, the middle class, in order to get there, right? And that right now, the Malthusians are like, we're going to suck all the energy out of the middle class, steal all their wealth, and then use that money to try to deliver this technology for us, the elites, but it will never be affordable for those people to use it, in a practical sense. But thinking about the different, because remember, if it's a true free market, people will use whatever energy is most affordable. So if you also have like small nuclear power plants being developed, which is what we know that technology is coming, like nuclear power plants the size of a dining room table. That might be more viable in certain applications than the solar stuff. The solar might be more practical, though, in a smaller scale. Like for example, if you drive up and down the interstate, you will notice that that the signs that have lights on them, the signs are all illuminated with lights, and all of them have a little solar panel on the pole. And that's a practical use for solar panels, because then you don't have to run wiring all the way from wherever your power plant is all the way to every single sign. That is a very practical use for solar panel. You save untold funding on the infrastructure necessary to run wires to all of those to all those light poles. So that's just one example of where solar it's already viable to use solar in that application, right? And then you can kind of extrapolate that to more energy intensive functions beyond just like a simple light on a road sign. So there's a whole, I think, just exciting future ahead of us if we have the courage and determination to go pursue it. But the point is that you have oil companies now investing money in order to cultivate an industry that is going to benefit the battery electronic vehicle industry, not because they're like, oh, we need to do this in order to satisfy the climate agenda. They're doing it because they realize that Saudi Arabia has proven the concept that they can extract what they call white gold. That's what lithium is called. It's called white gold because it's so valuable. And they have proven that they can extract it from seawater, from salt water, in oil runoff. And if these other oil companies don't rush to start doing it themselves, they are missing out on a massive market and a massive money-making opportunity. So now there's an economic demand, like there's an impetus now on oil companies to invest their profits in cultivating the next epoch of energy, which is not just electric, but just alternative energy, I guess you'd say. I guess like the stuff that the Malthusians fantasize about. We now have a viable economic model to get there very, very quickly using funds from the fossil fuel industry. And it's all being done from an incentive-based, from a true organic incentive-based position, not like a mandate from governments.
Yeah, I mean, it's the harmonization of the idea of the whole and the part, right? Like that historically, there's always been this battle over like, well, what do you cherish the most is in a society? Is it humanity as a whole, or is it the individual liberty? And people dispute and they fight over like, Austrian school of free marketeers that are like, no, there's no such thing as humanity. It's an abstract concept and thus useless. And only tyrants use the word humanity or general welfare to promote tyranny. And that's one extreme. And then the other extreme is like, no, the sort of more radical Keynesian, Marxist view of, the individual doesn't really matter ultimately that much. It's really all about the whole state, the society as a whole. And then, you got these disputes that go on forever. And people just need to think about, well, the Declaration of Independence. This is what as a Canadian, what blew my mind was I I just started thinking about, I read some speeches by Lincoln, and Lincoln always hammered at the fact that the Declaration of Independence that enshrines the sacredness of the individual and the inalienable rights of the individual is in harmony. It's a part of the same framework as the Constitution that really, enshrines the general welfare as the purpose of the nation. And they're not antagonistic. And it's always finding the balance of like personal incentive, participation of entrepreneurialism, creativity, while at the same time recognizing that we are the government. So like that's the point of representative government, is that we create laws, we mandate and choose representatives who are supposed to be from among the people and representing the wisest individuals who are the most qualified merit-wise to be in those positions of responsibility to then shape laws, economic policies that are going to benefit individuals and the society as a whole. And if you don't have a culture that can like discern that type of wisdom in themselves and in their society, then yeah, it'll always be usurped by tyrants and flatterers who will be demagogues, psychologically playing the mob against itself and using people against their own actual higher interests. I noticed that somebody in the chat box or in the chats mentioned something about this big they said, have you heard of China's plans in Tibet regarding a huge dam? It's happening now. Yeah, that's freaking awesome. It's not only the biggest dam in the world that they just approved. It's like I think $137 billion. It's begun. They've begun building this thing in Tibet, and it'll be 3 times bigger than the Yangtze River Dam, which is already the biggest dam in the world that China finished back in like I think 1999. But it's 3 times bigger than the biggest dam in the world that they're building now, and it's going to produce something like 300 billion kilowatt hours of power per year. It's going to totally like already like the living standards of Tibetans has increased. Average life expectancy has gone from like 41 years of age 50 years ago to being something like 75 years of age today. Wow. So you have like all of the metrics you could look at have just increased, even though like Western CIA front groups try to like paint Tibet as being like viciously raped and enslaved by the big bad Chinese. But you look at all the metrics that one would normally look at if you were thinking about whether a society is benefiting or not by their relationship with another group. And it's like, no, they've got high-speed rail in Tibet. We don't have any in Canada. We
don't have any in the United States. We have none.
I think you have like 12 kilometers or something in California.
No. We have it's like 40 miles of track in the Northeast, and it's a stretch between like 2 locations, and it only qualifies as high-speed rail because the track is straight enough where the train can get going fast enough to reach the bare minimum of like what is constituted as a high-speed rail. But it's not a technology that is different. It's the same track and the same train, just running on a very straight run where it can get going fast enough for about 40 minutes or 40 miles. It goes fast enough where it qualifies as high-speed rail, but it is not a high-speed rail. It's just going fast enough where it's on the lowest threshold of being, but it is not high-speed rail. So wow. That's the only place in America where we have what they call quote unquote high-speed rail, but it's the exact same technology as every other train in America. That's
embarrassing. I didn't know. I thought maybe there was actual high-speed. I didn't know. Okay.
Nope, I looked into it. Yeah, we've invested hundreds of billions of dollars in high-speed rail and haven't built a foot of track because it's all been laundered and stolen by criminals.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So we got our work it out for us, man.
Yep. So let's read some rants.
Wait! Before we read the rants, let's do this. Let's play ad number 2.
Do ad number 2. Yep.
Yeah. 1 second. This one I don't have to read anything. It is My Pillow. Here we are.
Just like all of you, I had problems sleeping. I had tried every pillow out there and nothing worked. I'd flip-flop all night, use my arm for support, and fall asleep, or I'd wake up with a sore neck or maybe a headache. Well, quality sleep comes from keeping your neck straight at night. You have to fill in that space between your head and your bed. That's why I invented My Pillow. My Pillow's patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs, and it doesn't matter if you sleep on your back, stomach, side, or any combination of all 3.
When I got My Pillow, I'm asleep Almost immediately, I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get Classic King My Pillows for only $19.98. Queen size just $18.98. Standard Classic My Pillows only $14.98. That's right, only $14.98. Plus all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free.
Yo, that is the most effective My Pillow ad I've ever encountered, and I gotta say, I've slept so bad last night, and my neck is so stiff that just hearing that ad, I kid you not, I'm going to be buying a My Pillow for the first time after this show is done. I'm doing it because that was persuasive. That was good.
Good. Yeah, I've been using My Pillow for a while. They're great. So, awesome. You got to put it in the dryer though. You got to like look up what you got to do. I think you got to throw it in the dryer when you first get it to make it
Activate
the right
powers.
Yeah. Like activate the Mike Lindell in it.
Okay.
All right. So we have one Badlands boost. You can go to badlandsmedia.tv/product/badlands-boost to do a boost. It's like a rant anytime. This is from last week. $40 Heart for Freedom. Thank you both for such a great show. I really enjoy my weekly history lessons, and your knowledge amazes me. I appreciate that you put the topic in the show title, as it really helps me find a topic when I want to debate someone. Yeah, we normally, just for those who are watching live or watching on replay, we normally, if we don't put the title in before, we normally go back and put the title in. So if you go to the Rumble page, you can go to playlists, and then it lists out every single show on Badlands, and you click on that show, and then it has every single episode from that show listed. So people always ask me, have you ever done an episode on whatever topic? Go to the Badlands playlist and then just do like a word search, and you can probably find the topic that you're looking for. We've covered a lot of different stuff, but we're always open to new suggestions. And there is another suggestion on here that we may have read this one last week, but I'll just go ahead and read it again. Fernie65, $20 from last Wednesday. Your show is a must-hear every week. I have learned so much. Thanks for all your knowledge. Can you discuss why Americans are so in love with Israel? Normies will not bend when Israel is mentioned. Maybe a show topic. Yes, we have talked about that before, about doing a show about the CIA PSYOP to get Zionism ingrained into evangelicalism and conflated with it, so that the religious undertones would basically subvert the politics and make people kind of blind to the reality and just kind of let their like religious fervor take over. So we will at some point do a show on that. We have done the origins of Zionism, so you can go search the playlist for that, back in the 19th century, coming out of London, as well as the Palest settlement in Eastern Europe. So go take a look for that. But yeah, other than that, I think that's about everything. Let me make sure we haven't had any rants come in. Yeah, Matt, what do you have coming up?
Oh, there's a lot on the agenda. I'm currently, actually, for those who might be interested, I guess, I've just been commissioned to do a series of lectures for a course on open versus closed system thinking, which I've recorded and made public 4 of the lectures. I speak really slowly because it's going to be translated into a few languages, and it's first going up in the Russian market. So again, I'm speaking maybe excruciatingly slowly, and I'm sorry, but if people want to check those out, it's going to be a full course of like 15 classes going through deep history, philosophy, the battle of Plato versus Aristotle, the science of anti-entropy versus entropy, Malthus versus the American school. So there's a lot of different angles that it's going to be treated. The whole philosophical tradition that treats the mind as a closed thing that can only receive imprints from the senses and then like recuperate memories, but not actually think creatively, versus the actual potent school of human thought that goes back to ancient times, which the oligarchy's been trying to suppress. So I've been trying to play with that. And if people go to any of my video channels, they can see those first 5 lectures available now. But yeah,
awesome.
Trying to stay busy.
Awesome. Well, I've plugged my computer in, but it's telling me it's not.
All right.
So yeah, we probably need to wrap it up here. Everyone hit the thumbs up. Matt, we'll see you next week. Yeah, and that's Breaking History. Episode, all right. Whatever number it is, 79. I'm
losing track. It's all good. All right. See you, Gordon. See you, everybody. Thanks for joining us.